Hello and welcome back to the second part of lesson 9.5. We are still looking at factoring trinomials of the type x squared plus bx plus c. For the part 2 video, we're going to look at factoring when we have a negative c value. So the c value in this case would be this negative 48. Now if you remember, to get a negative number when you multiply, that means I either have to have a negative and a positive or a positive and a negative. So the process is going to be the same as when we were setting up these factors for the part 1 video. However, now we just have to look at positive and negatives instead of having two negatives or two positives. So I'm going to start out by creating a table, and we're going to have factors of 48, and then we're going to look at their sum. So factors of 48, if I start out, I'll have 1 and 48. Now I will have to make one positive, one negative, so I'll make it a positive 1 and a negative 48. But that also means I could have a negative 1 and a positive 48. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to look at 2 and negative 24, which means I could also have a negative 2 and a positive 24. We could have 3 and a negative 16, or we could have a negative 3 and a positive 16. We could have 4 and a negative 12, or we could have, let's slide this up, negative 4 and a positive 12. And then we could also divide this by a positive 6 and a negative 8, or a negative 6 and a positive 8. And I think those are it. So now all I have to do is I have to go and I find their sums. So 1 and a negative 48 is going to give me negative 47. Negative 1 plus 48 is a positive 47. And if you remember, if we slide this back down here, we want to get a factor of 13. So this right here is what my goal is. So 2 and negative 24 is going to give me a negative 22 or a positive 22. 3 and a negative 16 will give me a negative 13 or a positive 13. And at this point in time, because I know that I needed to get 13, I'm going to stop. Okay, so this is what I want. So I know that my factor then is going to be x minus 3 times x plus 16. And again, you can go ahead and FOIL that out or distribute and double check. But these right here are the two factors. And we'll do one more example, example 6, which is similar to example 5. So again, I want a product that will give me a negative 27 and a sum that will give me 6. So I have my factors of 27, and I want to look at their sums. So because I have a negative c value, I know that one has to be positive, one has to be negative. So I have a positive 1 and a negative 27, a negative 1 and a positive 27. We can go 3 and a negative 9, or negative 3 and a positive 9. And that should actually be it for factors. So now if I add these up, I have 1 and negative 27 is going to give me a negative 26. Negative 1 and a positive 27 is going to give me a positive 26. 3 and negative 9 is a negative 6. And negative 3 plus 9 will give me a positive 6. And that's actually what I was looking for. So my factors will be x minus 3 times x plus 9. Please go ahead and try to do example 7 on your own. This is very similar to what examples 5 and 6 were, but in this case we do have a negative c value, or negative c value, as well as a negative middle term, but the process is again all the same. So our factors of negative 18, and we want to look at our sum. So factors of 18, we have negative 1, positive 18, positive 1, negative 18. We'll have a negative 2 and a positive 9, or a positive 2 and negative 9. We could have a negative 3 and a positive 6, or a positive 3 and a negative 6. And that should be our factors. So now let's go ahead and look at their sums. So negative 1 plus 18 will give me 17. A positive 1 and a negative 18 will give me a negative 17. Negative 2 and 9 is going to be 7 and negative 7. And negative 3 and 6 will give us a positive 3, or 3 and negative 6 is a negative 3. So in this case, my factors are going to be x plus 3 times x minus 6. Example 8. We're going to start out the same way. We're going to look at our factors. And in this case, we have factors of negative 24. And we want to find a sum. So I'm looking to get factors of negative 24 as well as a sum of a negative 5. So 1 and negative 24, negative 1 and 24, 2 and negative 12, or negative 12, or sorry, negative 2 and a positive 12. We'll have 3 and 8, and negative 3 and a positive 8. And actually, the more you do of these, the better the quicker you're going to start to see these. So I'm actually going to stop right there because I think I have enough. I have 1 and negative 24, so this will give me a negative 23 and a positive 23. 2 and a negative 12 will give me a negative 10 and a positive 10. 3 and negative 8 will give me my negative 5, and that's actually what I was looking for. So here I have x plus 3 times x minus 8. And these are my two binomial factors. Please let me know if you are having any issues with the factoring. Otherwise, we're going to cover one more thing with this section, and then we'll be done. The last type of problem that you may see, if you notice here, is where we have more than just one variable. And in this case, you can see that we have an x squared. Our middle term here has an x and a y, and then our final term has a y squared. So we actually have two different variables integrated into this. Now this is still because I have a squared front, a squared ending, and then I have a compilation of the two in the middle. This is still going to be able to factor out just like what we've been doing all along. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and create my table. So I have factors, and in this case I want to find factors of 24, and it's a positive 24. And I want to find my sum. So my sum has to give me 11. So I could do 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8. And again, at this point in time, I can see that 3 and 8 are going to give me 11. I know that 2 and 12 are 14, and 1 and 24 are going to give me 25. So I'm just going to go ahead and stop right here. Now, for actually writing out the factors, it's going to be very similar to what we were doing before. So I know that my first term is going to be an x because I have this x squared. But I know my middle term has to have both x and y. So when I write this first factor, I have to have both x and y. So here I have x plus 3y. And then in my second set of parentheses, or in my second factor, I'm going to have x plus 8y. Now I know that the 3 and the 8 here have to have the y with them because this last term, or the y squared term, has a coefficient with it. So if we FOIL this out just to double check our work, you're going to see that we get x squared plus 8xy. Then I have 3, I'm going to add 3xy to that. And then 8 times 3 is plus 24. And then y times y is y squared. So this is going to give me x squared plus 11xy plus 24y squared. So you can see it actually did work. So my factors are going to be this x plus 3y times the x plus 8y. And our last example is going to, again, be very similar to what we did in example 9. So I have two different variables. I have both the x and the y's. And then I notice that I have a negative c value and a negative middle term. So I'm looking for factors of a negative 77. And I have to find the sum. So I have 1 and a negative 77, or a negative 1 and a positive 77. I could have a positive 7 and a negative 11, or we can do a negative 7 and a positive 11. So by adding these up, I know it's not going to be the first two because these are way too big. So if I look at these next two, I have 7 plus a negative 11 will give me a negative 4, and negative 7 plus 11 will give me a positive 4. So I actually want this set right here as my factors. So again, because I have both x and y in my original problem here, I'm going to set this up as x plus 7y, and remember the coefficient goes with the y because I have a coefficient on the y squared term, and then I have x minus 11y. So these are my two factors for example 10. Please let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day.